Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest D-Zone webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Jason Cockrum, and I'm the Community Engagement Manager here at D-Zone. And we're glad you're here. We've got a really relevant and an exciting topic for you today, so we're happy that you've joined us. If you're new to D-Zone, we are one of the world's largest online communities of software developers and experts. We publish all sorts of knowledge resources for developers and really anyone passionate about software development. We have things like ref cards and trend reports and thousands of articles written and published online by our community. And all of this makes us the go-to knowledge hub for developers all over the world. We also do a ton of great events like this one today. And you can find out more about those at our website at dzone.com/events. We've got things like fireside chats, virtual roundtables, and who knows, maybe even we'll be at some in-person events later this year. So be sure to check out dzone.com/events for all that information. Today, we're going to be talking about a pretty big issue facing a lot of companies and development teams today. As businesses continue to increasingly rely on software and development to drive growth, they obviously need to bring on more developers, right? And so as development teams grow larger and more distributed, the number of places software is being generated and consumed naturally increases as well. And so the rise of this microservice architecture has increased the speed of delivering capabilities, but also the complexity of ensuring that all those things work together, right? They all need to talk to each other to make sure everything is secure and safe and efficient. And so because of all these things, we need to make sure our teams have reliable access to our required software packages and artifacts, right? Your team needs to make sure they can access what they need to do their job. Pretty simple. So to talk about all these challenges and some solutions is Richard Clark from Jfrong. He's joining me today, and he's the Solutions Engineering Manager for DevOps Acceleration at Jfrong. And aside from his extensive development experience, he is an entrepreneur and an inventor. He ran his own startup in the Internet of Things space. He holds multiple technology patents and has been a key member of several M&A startups. He's also an experienced winemaker, although sadly, he did not bring any samples for all of us to share today. So we'll have to ask him about that. Anyway, here at D-Zone, we're all about community, so we encourage you to get involved and to get engaged in our conversation. On the right-hand side of your screen, there's a box where you can chat with some other attendees and talk about what's being discussed and kind of your own experiences. There's also a place where you can ask questions, and we'll do our best to answer as many of those as we can towards the end. So at this point, I'm going to stop talking and turn it over to Richard. Richard, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thanks for that lovely introduction. So thanks for joining us today for the webinar. So very exciting webinar. This is a common challenge that my team is in charge of every day. We're dealing with customers' issues in terms of how to distribute your software at a very large scale, and essentially starting as a small startup all the way going to large Fortune 100 companies deal with these challenges on a day-to-day basis. So we're going to go through these challenges today, kind of give you guys some best practices on how you can remediate this stuff. One of the things that you'll see, as you know, based on that introduction, I am a solution engineering manager at Jfrong. I've been with the company for more than 4 years, and our day-to-day activities are to support our customers, both understanding and overcoming the challenges of DevOps and security. So DevSecOps is now the norm. This is one of the challenges and what our platform is able to address. Now, we do understand our customers have a choice of solutions, and as such, I wanted to kind of steer you through that process. In addition to having an awesome cat photo here, he is one of my Zoom photos. It's a great conversation starter. I highly recommend a nice background like that. Everyone has seen the typical DevOps continuous update slide. This is something very standard, but what I wanted to do is kind of do a fun play on this in a comparison to the Marvel universe. And as such, as you can see, collecting the Infinity Stones, this is one of the big things of having everything, the power at your hands to control the universe. And this is one of the benefits of this. And they kind of broke this down into each of the various products and areas that you need to focus on in terms of having a proper distribution platform. So it all starts with the soul of any product, and this is dealing with your source code control, your universal binary manager. This is something that Jfrong started with the Artifactory business. Having this as your key soul for the product, this is where you're storing all of your artifacts, and the challenges of versioning this, having a single source of truth. Highly recommend having a solution in place if you don't have one yet. dealing with the access control, how to federate credentials across not only one site, but multiple sites as organizations grow. This is a common trend that we see, and one of the biggest hurdles in terms of getting wide adoption. And especially, it gets more complicated as you add more and more tools to the environment as well. So anytime something changes, new access controls are made. Those also need to be synchronized across the board. The other part is actually taking those artifacts, the packages that you produce, how do you actually replicate those across the various data centers that you have? Now, these data centers could be running on self-hosted, they could be running in co-location, they could be in various cloud providers. Having abilities to replicate that seamlessly so that your users don't really need to know where they're getting the artifacts, but it's synchronized across at a global level. We'll kind of run through some of those best practices as well. Of course, the brains of any product is to actually build the images themselves. And with various CI and CD solutions, there's countless out there. I'm sure many of the customers, typically we see the trend, most customers will kind of consolidate on a handful of tools, like we're talking about, like 1 to 3 tools here. Having more CI solutions in place makes it a little bit more complicated. And again, you want that single source of truth, the single record of creating your artifacts, versioning them, and being able to use those. And then taking it to the next level and actually deploying them, distributing those artifacts. And especially if you have global teams, you need to make sure that they can also build and work with the same data set as well. Now, continuous distribution is a huge challenge, and this is some of the benefits that you'll see with various solutions out there. In terms of what we've done at Jfrong, we'll kind of run you through that. And it applies to other solutions that you might have in use as well. Lastly, securing your artifacts. Like what do you do when the next 0 day comes out? What happens if your organization turns upside down because you're trying to fight an issue like a log4j? This kind of disrupted the entire holiday season a couple years ago. So ways that we can secure those releases, roll them back, is another area that we'll focus on. So one of the things that you'll see essentially in terms of any global DevSecOps solution, essentially dealing with various distant data centers and cloud providers, mixing, matching AWS, GCP, Azure, no matter what you have, you want to make sure that you have seamless interactions between each of those. You do have distributed teams and build systems. We typically want to make sure that those build systems are very close to where your artifact manager is. So you want to make sure that your binaries get published and can also cut down that latency. And this is a huge important thing, right? Latency incurs time costs, which can slow your development time down. This is some areas that we can focus on, and we'll show you how we can do this through replication techniques. Also want to make sure that those binaries are available everywhere. Again, the single source of truth, making sure that your teams are working with the same data set. If there's new production code that's getting created, you want to make sure that all of your teams are adopting that. But you also want the flexibility of pulling in other external sources and being able to scan those as well. Having the solution highly available and reliable is another huge important part. We want to make sure that even if there's an instance that goes down, can you roll back to a hot DR site? Do you have a full replica of your artifacts at a global level to your other data centers? And then again, security is a strong area here. Anytime there's a new vulnerability incurred, it does slow things down, and it costs a lot more to fix this later in production releases. Next, what we'll get into first is universal packages. Like, how do we manage all the various source code and binaries? How do we do this seamlessly and working with the constraints of a solution? We do want to make sure that the solution is agnostic to whatever developers choose to use for their various package types. And this is why, with Artifactory and what we offer more than 32 packages and technologies. So no matter what the developer chooses to use, they can use those native tools. They can also use common trends like CLI or REST APIs to interact with these technologies. But again, being agnostic to the platform, giving developers a choice of solutions, mixing, matching, and it's a nice eye candy chart, but you can see tons of names in the ecosystem. We need to be able to support all of this seamlessly. And if there's any changes that that incur with an API, then we need to also adapt very quickly for that too. So it doesn't hinder your development team. Software supply chain is another big area, and we'll talk a little bit about this as well in terms of securing these releases and going through that and supporting this across the board with the other data centers that you have. Obviously, once you start building these various tools, and in fact, a lot of companies and organizations inherit other development teams, and it can be quite daunting when you're dealing with multiple solutions in place. But access at its forefront is something that's super critical to have very seamless access controls. And again, it gets accentuated even more as you expand globally. You want to make sure that everything can be accessed and done in a seamless fashion. And if there's any changes, let's say you need to revoke a user or add new users to different data sites, how do we synchronize that across those sites? So in terms of the Jfrong products, we include an access component for all of our services. It does allow us to easily integrate to the existing tools that you have. So whether you're using SAML, LDAP, Okta, OAuth, any of the variety of SSO technologies, you can seamlessly do that with our platform. Again, you would want to consolidate this as well to the other tools that you have in use. And this is a common trend that you see with DevSecOps today. In some cases, you might need to also set up time-based access controls for your tokens. We need to support a fully fault-tolerant DR scenarios. Again, losing access to those users on the sites, if you have to switch over to another site, you want to make sure that those are synchronized. And that's one of the biggest hurdles that you see when, if you don't have a DR solution in place and you start to do that. A lot of the manual labor is done, and it typically falls on the administration team, how to synchronize those credentials from one site to another. So it's good to get a head start on that and make sure that you have a solid plan in place. In terms of what we've done at Jfrong in terms of access federation, this allows us to synchronize these credentials across all the various data sites, and it handles everything from users, groups, tokens, and all the permissions and access controls. And there are a few types of topologies that we'll get into as well, and on how to do this. We'll also talk about how to, essentially share certificates across those various sites. And anytime you need to create, refresh, revoke those tokens, these are all done through the UI. There's also REST APIs that you can do for this, so you can automate the creation of this. Again, setting up a proper topology. If you're already a global organization today, it makes sense to start right away with this. If you're a small development team of one, something to keep in mind, you want to have a solid plan going forward to have an environment set up properly for this. And some of the challenges in terms of, if you look at a typical global footprint requires those access controls, not only the access to be enabled at those sites, but we also need to deal with the replication of the artifacts themselves. These are the packages, the native packages that you're working with, and having those synchronized in near real time will help minimize the impact for any latency. Again, this is one of the big challenges that you'll see once you start expanding globally. So some of the common challenges for distribution, as you can see, not every site has the most solid network access. So dealing with network issues is a common trend. You might also have limited bandwidth, and it could vary. This accentuates even further. The further the sites are, then you might have limited bandwidth. And how can you guarantee that your artifacts can get there seamlessly in the most efficient time possible? We also need to account if there's any data center outages. What do you do if all of your artifacts are in one basket and that basket is down? How do you access what impact does that cause to your organization if you're incurring hours of downtime because you didn't have a plan in place for backing up those artifacts at another site? So that's a big part of this now, and it's even more important in today's day and age. You can also deal with multiple sources of truth, which is another common trend. Again, having other development teams might have their choice of solutions, but how do we synchronize all that? And again, having a common distribution layer is important to think about as well. So with any solution, not just Jfrong, but others, as you look to expand and synchronize those artifacts, there's really two types of replication. Push and pull replication, they both have their own benefits. In terms of push replication, it is offered in most solutions where you're just replicating in one direction only, pushing from one site to another, dealing with your locally produced code. You can just seamlessly synchronize that to other sites. And from the other site, then they have to wait for those artifacts to make it there in order for them to use those. Some of the benefits of pull replication are that, again, you can pull this from a remote site, and it can also be done at a schedule or cron-based event. So event-based replication is a lot more efficient because it can leverage things like placing the metadata first and then guaranteeing that the remote site can see all the artifacts that are available. And then at that point, it may just need to require the artifact to get pulled down. So if you're dealing with a large Docker image, for example, at least you'll have a reference there on the far site, and then it'll wait until the artifact is brought over, and then it can be consumed at that point. So there are other ways that you can do this by setting up like on-demand proxy events. You can have your teams browsing these artifacts to see what's at the remote site. Again, these are common problems that you run into as you have more and more sites. Event-based pull replication is usually the most heavily used one. It's offered in not all solutions offer that, but it is part of the Jfrong platform. And it does allow us to keep things in sync, even if something gets deleted on the far end. Now, there is one challenge that you need to be cautious of, and that's dealing with the different replication loops. If you have a set of pull and push replications set up, there is a possibility when you're adding multiple sites, what happens if an artifact gets deleted before it actually got propagated to the far end site. And now it's in this situation where you're running into a challenge where maybe the artifact's not actually there or didn't get there in time. This is something that, again, is a common problem that you'll see with more and more sites. So designing a proper topology and ways to leverage these different replication techniques is super critical here in this scenario. Now, some of these, you'll see the basics of replication groups are something to be careful of, right? And that's between star and mesh topologies. This is how we can actually implement a more elegant way to manage this stuff. Now, the differences between the star topology and a mesh topology. One, star topology, you're doing a centralized build server. So this is a great use case for if you're a development site of one, you have one data center, and you start to onboard a plan where you have another data center. You can easily add that. Everything's all centrally located from your main site, and now you can set up the other far end sites and add that to that topology. Then any subsequent sites that get added will get a copy of those artifacts or credentials that are used. Versus a mesh topology is one where you'll have multiple sites all making changes, and you want to propagate those changes across the various data centers. So you're not relying on just one data center. It's actually a mesh between all the sites. This gives you some additional protection in the event of your main site going down. You still have a full replica and copy of those artifacts at each of the other sites. And you can do this selectively based on the repositories. You don't have to necessarily synchronize everything across each site. But it gives you some added protection there. And it also minimizes the headaches of finding out that maybe one set of users on one site isn't actually available on the others. So the mesh topology approach is a really good option to go with. In terms of the star topology, you can see some of the differences here in terms of leveraging both push and pull replication. So again, with the star topology, you're dealing with one centralized site and pushing those artifacts, replicating those to the other remote far sites. Again, your build servers, your existing tools, whatever native command line tools you're using, will be able to leverage those artifacts once they're placed on the other far sites. Versus the pull replication, again, this can be happen with both an event-based or scheduled replication. And you do want to have a backup plan, like in the event of the pull replication not happening automatically. You can have a scheduled replication set up automatically as a backup measure to ensure that you're catching the event, you're doing it on a timely manner and at a certain time of day. So that way you're guaranteed, it's a safety net in case you didn't get the copy of that artifact on the far end. In terms of the full mesh topologies, some things to consider here are, again, leveraging the same replication techniques. You can see that as we add more and more sites, we can actually leverage a combination of push and pull replication, but the chart on the left indicates that we're leveraging what we call virtual repositories. It's a layered approach that allows you to combine a set of local and remote repositories with one physical entity, which is a virtual repo. The virtual repo is actually what your build system would use or what your developers would use to publish an artifact into the local sites at each site. And we would use that mesh topology, the replication options, to synchronize those from one local to one far remote. And this enables you to have a common layer, even if you have 4 sites here in this case, to have a copy of those artifacts and synchronize automatically and leveraging these techniques. Now, the more and more repositories you add, this can get a little complicated, especially if you have multiple push and pull replications enabled. And for that reason, we've enhanced this further with a capability we call federated repositories. And federated repositories handles all the bidirectional synchronization of artifacts by leveraging a combination of push and pull replications. So by setting up a federated repository, you're able to add all of your data centers to that federation. And that means anytime an artifact is published at one site, we automatically handle the replication of those artifacts to the other sites. And this allows you to have remote dev teams hitting 2 separate instances, but synchronize those artifacts in near real time across the various sites that you have. So this definitely simplifies the experience of setting up the replications. In the Jfrong platform UI, you can convert existing repositories to a federated repository, or you can just start off from the get-go. If you're not using the solution, you can set up a new federated repo and then add all the various sites. And if you spin up and add, let's say, a DR site in 6 months, you can easily just add that to the federation, and it'll start to synchronize those artifacts over to the other far site. So it definitely helps alleviate a lot of the administration headaches and setting up repositories and making sure that those artifacts are making it there to the other far sites. And you can see here on the topology how this actually works. Again, you're adding the various sites to the federation repository, and it's synchronizing those artifacts. In this case here, it's illustrating an npm local. So a set of local npm artifacts that your team is developing can be synchronized bidirectionally across all the 3 sites. And any locally produced code is guaranteed to make it there on the far end. So if you're dealing with a global development team and you have teams working around the clock, what do you know? You wake up the next morning, you already have a copy of those artifacts. And if something's built in real time, you'll start to see those artifacts synchronized over to the other sites. Now, this is done at the repository level. So in a lot of cases, some of the larger customers that we're working with today, they may not necessarily synchronize everything over to each site, but they'll choose their production artifacts, the ones that are most critical in the event of the London site going down in this instance. Can I have a copy of everything at San Francisco, or am I going to actually have any downtime incurred when there is a major outage? So when you're dealing with the cloud deployment, if you're using our SaaS offering, this is something to keep in mind of. You want to make sure that you choose the repositories that you want to synchronize and understand that there will be a storage and a transfer impact if you decide to do everything. So that's something that it all comes down to cost at that point. But this capability does exist to make it easier for you. So now that we understand a little bit about how we're synchronizing all the artifacts, these are your build artifacts, the ones that you're actually using to actually deploy. The next step, the next logical step here is to actually, how do we take all the builds, all the releases that we've created, how do we package those up and ensure delivery to the remote far sites? And how do we do this seamlessly and have measures to automate it as well? Like any typical CD solution, you definitely want to automate this process and make sure that it can be used. So again, dealing with distribution, it's a service that we offer as part of our platform. And not only does it have the main platform to use to create what we call a release bundle, it's a package or collection of artifacts. It's the bill of materials for all of your software release. And a great example would be, let's say you're a Docker host and you're building Docker images and you want to bundle that with a Helm chart. Package that up as a formal release, sign it, prevent tampering. So this is an immutable release. And I now have a package of artifacts that I can use to deploy this Docker plus Helm chart to a remote far site where I may have a deployment where I want to take that Docker and Helm chart and deploy it. So the distribution platform is the one that actually enables creating of that release. And it has measures in order to distribute it out to wherever you choose to the other remote data centers. So it does include things like traceability and auditability for distributing that. We can see when it was created. We can prevent tampering by signing with a GPG key. We have permissions controls around this as well. And it also is very fault tolerant in terms of distributing out to remote sites that may have any network bandwidth issues. It does a lot of caching that is able to handle that. So as you can see, the release bundle, again, packaging up whatever variety of package types you have, anything like NPM, Maven, Docker, you can package up all of the artifacts into this release. And there's a query that you can use to assemble this. You can automate this. There's a REST API to create the release bundles automatically. You could have a build pipeline that once it finishes building your images, you run your test on it, and now you have a quality gate where you take those production artifacts, package them up as a group, and then secure that, putting even things like release notes applying to the release bundle of what you've packaged up. And it's a great measure in that you can take this artifact now and share it with other end users. So these could be customers, data centers, you name it. So we take that release, there's a distribution mechanism that will actually publish that to the remote data centers. And here you see a couple examples of distributing those artifacts to other data centers. Again, you could leverage a variety of infrastructure. It could be self-hosted, it could be our SaaS offerings, any various cloud providers. And great use case, again, dealing with those networks that have really high latency, we can distribute this much easier using this cache. The other one is to actually take that release, and you might have a use case where you have partners or customers you want to share these releases with. These could be external to your organization. And again, having the ability of having those permission controls and the bill of materials that goes into that release, you're able to provide to your end users, even these external entities, the manifest for this is everything that we're providing, and it's passed all of our checks as well. And when you're distributing these to your customers, anybody that's external to your organization, then this is where you're able to leverage something called distribution edges. We'll talk about edge nodes here in just a minute. And that allows your customers to pull those artifacts directly from wherever their nearest edge location would be. Again, cutting that latency down so your customers are able to seamlessly get those artifacts in a very timely manner. So in terms of distribution edges, as you can see, these vary a little bit from the main Artifactory sites in that they're read-only instances. And you can package those up using a release bundle. And this is those artifacts that we've, again, created as a mutable release to push it there. And you can also set these up as a remote cache. So a remote cache, you could have a developer accessing the edge and then pulling down only a select version of the artifacts from the main site where you do all of your builds. So that is that's a consideration that you can leverage with smart remotes. The edge distribution edges also have their own user interface, just like we have with Artifactory. So again, it's a way for you to browse the artifacts and titles that are there and then pull them down. Again, having that edge that located closer to where those development teams are or where your customers are located. You can, again, leverage the same authentication providers even that you were using previously when we talked about access. You can leverage the same thing there too. You can see in terms of the topology, setting up, again, the edges closer to where those teams and offices are located. Again, these edges could be running in various cloud providers. You can mix and match cloud providers. You can run these in a self-hosted fashion as well. And the benefit, again, you're creating and getting those artifacts closer to those remote teams. This also helps reduce the burden on your main production site. So you don't want to have customers accessing your main site when you can actually give them a much more localized cache closer to them. Again, it also helps limit the security impact to things that you have to worry about on the main site. There are some other advanced techniques that you can use once you do set up a distribution topology that we talked about. So as soon as you're synchronize your artifacts using various replication, like if you're using federated repos plus distribution, now maybe you want to accelerate even further and have even cutting the latency down by leveraging services like maybe you want to build a content delivery network or a P2P options. These are also leveraged with the platform. We also have the ability to set up private links through the major cloud providers as well. So maybe you have a security concerns over SaaS, you can lock that down and have your systems or do IP whitelisting to that environment as well. So again, some of the advanced options, some of our larger customers are implementing these now to really cut down the latency and build to a much larger deployment. The next thing I want to talk about is distribution. Like, how do we secure the releases that we've assembled? How do we guarantee that what we've bundled together as a release for our end users is free of vulnerabilities? Because I don't want to put any vulnerable artifacts out to my customers. I want to be able to have a full manifest, that software bill of materials, super important, and then being able to roll back something if I find that there's a major issue with it that maybe is opening up some credential risks, right? These are something that you can do with our X-ray solution. Now, the norm today, most customers have 3, 5. I've even seen some customers have 7 security solutions in place. So it is a very common trend to have multiple solutions. But one of the things I want to highlight is that just focusing on source code scanning isn't enough today, right? So you could have the best source code analyzer, and then you could package up developers pulling in artifacts that are bringing in inadvertent artifacts that are vulnerable, can introduce new vulnerabilities. By the time you actually release your binaries out to production, there might be a lot of security risks as part of that. So very important to leverage shifting left to start scanning things, even in the IDE environment. As you're writing your first lines of code, there's a plugin that you can use to actually monitor the code that you're writing and see the impact for that. Is it free of vulnerabilities? Does it have, are there applicable vulnerabilities that are part of this? Using contextual analysis, we can help your teams prioritize the fixes that maybe inadvertently there might be 300 vulnerabilities that are shown in the vulnerability in the actual artifact that you've produced, but maybe only a handful are actually applicable to your organization. So we can look through that code and highlight the ones that are actually using vulnerable function calls that are opening up for security risks. So the plugin is a great option to use for the IDE. There are ways that you can even scan your git pull and commit requests to see what's being introduced in the code that you're writing. And then as you go further to the right, creating that software bill of materials, being able to see even clear text passwords that might be leveraged in any of the configuration files. If you're doing Docker or Terraform, doing infrastructure as code scanning as well. And having that full manifest, so by the time you actually start to package up your distribution release, you have a full manifest for everything that's going into there, and you understand fully what is being deployed out to the edge. And that's really the true benefit of shifting left and shifting right. So by the time you get to production, you know exactly everything that's there, and it's much easier to fix things as you go through that process. So there's full visibility into leveraging this in the platform. So now that we understand some of the key capabilities of how we can not only manage the access controls, replicating those artifacts, packaging up those releases, distributing them, leveraging distribution edges, this kind of summarizes some of the capabilities that you can use with the Jfrong platform or any solution for that matter. But following these techniques will help minimize the risk for everything that you're doing, and it will help accelerate deployments for your customers. Now, one of the things that I can show you a quick demo, if I log in here, wait for this to load. I'll just show you how this all comes together in the user interface. Okay, so as you can see, this is a topology that I have created. So this deals with multiple instances. In my case, I'm producing everything from this main site on the West Coast. Under the administration section, you can see we have the option to set up the topologies that I was referring to earlier in the slides. So under the star or mesh topology, you can easily set up your topology by selecting the instance that you're going to be using as a central location. And then you can, from there, you can add the additional edge sites or other regions that you have at play. And when you go through this policy in creating this, it allows you to choose the entities that you want to synchronize. So again, this is very easy to set up with multiple data centers. Once you validate the settings, you apply this, and it starts to synchronize those credentials across the board. In terms of the repositories, as you can see, there's a set of various repositories. So selecting the various package type that you're going to be using. Again, these are all the native artifacts that are going to be packaged up for your distribution release. So selecting a technology of the ones that we offer, or even creating a new one, such as leveraging a federated repository, where I already know that I have 3 data centers, and maybe I want to create a set of Docker images that are going to be shared across the 3 data centers, then I can simply do that. And under the federation option, I would specify the 3 data centers that I have available. So back to the actual distribution, you can see the ability to take the artifacts that you produced. And in this case here, yeah, you can see all the release bundles that I've created, and each of these has a manifest for it. And you can choose the actual, there's a build spec that actually allows you to create the query. So in this case, it's going to take artifacts from a Maven repository, and you can automate this again using the REST APIs. But once you package up the artifacts, the release, again, you can apply release notes and actually distribute this content. You'll see some of the actions that are available once you have your release. In this case, this is one that we've already created, and I've already signed it with a GPG key, which makes it immutable. So I'm not able to delete it, but I can certainly clone it, and I can add additional packages to it. And once it's ready to go, we can distribute that version to the various sites. And in this case, you would have your multiple distribution edges or other data centers that you want to share, and the mechanisms in place to actually start that distribution with full visibility into it. And then rolling back a release is as easy as coming in here and deleting it from the edge nodes themselves. So you can select the delete from edge, and from this point, you can say, all right, I want to delete this artifact from the other 3 data centers that I had distributed this to. So that's one of the benefits of that as well. And of course, with X-Ray, in terms of the data that we're getting with the artifacts, again, looking at something very critical like your Docker production release, we can find easily that in this particular Docker image, we have a set of vulnerabilities. And you can see here that of this Docker image, there's actually 299 vulnerabilities that were identified, but only the few listed here on this front page are actually applicable to your organization. So we have actually looked into the code to see, here you can see some of the higher severity issues, 9.8 severity, and clicking into that artifact, you'll see the reason why we flagged this as an applicable vulnerability and where it is in the code to actually modify. In this case here, it's part of a nginx HTML config file, and we've shown you where it is in the actual Docker image. Again, you're taking this Docker and distributing it, but now you have full visibility before you start packaging it up. You're able to fully vet it of vulnerabilities. You can also do things like secrets management as well. And with secrets, you can see some of the default passwords are found in the image. Unknowingly, again, this is a great example. A developer might have pulled this artifact in, but now you have even down to the lines of code that show you that this is an Apache Tomcat concern in the XML file that we found. And it breaks it down into very simple terms how to remediate it. So that's some of the benefits of leveraging the integrated security offering as part of our platform. And, again, coming down to the distribution side of things, being able to do this seamlessly, that's the benefit of having it all from one central UI. But again, with the REST APIs, you can tie into other systems that you have. And that's about all I had left. This is, now that you know some of the capabilities of what you can do with the platform, you have all the power you needed to start to deploy something in real time just like this. So we do have a trial option that you guys can get started with if you're interested. We're also happy to help. We do a lot of these webinars as well. We run you through some of the best practices. I think last couple days ago we did one around more heavily on the security focus, some of the stuff I just showed you as well. So just wanted to open it up if there's any questions that otherwise what do we have left?
Well, cool. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing all that, Richard. That was a lot of really great information there. It's kind of cool. I'm always blown away by watching the demo of like how in depth it gets and how it all works together and all that kind of stuff, and just like how granular it can get as far as like where the vulnerabilities are and how to fix it and all this kind of other stuff. So awesome. It was pretty cool. Yeah, Marcus was actually showing us on Tuesday with Jfrong. We did another webinar with him on Tuesday, and he was showing that like there's even a section where they can actually recommend code for you to fix to repair the vulnerability. So it's fascinating all the stuff they can do. Yep. So, and as Richard said, we actually do have, or Jfrog's offering a free trial. I think we just posted the link there in the chat box, so be sure to grab that and check it out and poke around and see what you can find and all that kind of good stuff there. I think I'm going to say this is kind of our last call for any questions. I don't think I've seen any come through, but I mean, you pretty much covered everything. So I don't know if there's anything you left out.
Yeah. What I can do is I can send some information to the registrants regarding some of these concepts that will kind of help you get started. So I think that would be a good place to go. And you have my email there as well. So anyone that has any questions, feel free to reach out to me, and be happy to help you get through this journey.
Yeah, for sure. And also, everyone will get a copy of this presentation after we're done here. So you'll get to rewatch this wonderful presentation, but you also get the slide deck as well. So you don't want to listen to us ramble on. But anyway, just thank you again so much, Richard, for joining us. Really appreciate you being here. Thank you, everybody else, for joining us, taking some time out of your Thursday. Glad you guys could be here with us. Once again, don't forget to check out our website, dzone.com/events. Like I said, we've got all kinds of great events up there, virtual roundtables, fireside chats, all kinds of webinars on anything you could ever want to know about development. So there's a ton of great resources there. Be sure to check that out. I think we're going to go ahead and give everybody a few more minutes back of their day. So again, thank you so much for joining us. Richard, thanks for being here. And we'll see everyone again real soon. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.